Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. It is a post-match pod today. We got back to winning ways after defeat to Aston Villa at the weekend with a 3-0 win over Club Brugge last night, making it 6 from 6 in the Champions League, a 100% record in Europe so far this season, and long may that continue. And it was a team which, while familiar in some places, was certainly a bit unfamiliar in others. Nevertheless, moments of brilliance from Noni Madueke, or Noni Madueke, as Martin Keown kept calling him on the TV last night. And also Gabriel Martinelli helped fire us to a 3-0 win. So we're going to get into all of that in today's show. A couple of things just before we start, though. It is getting close to Christmas, and maybe you're lacking the inspiration. You don't know what to get the Arsenal fan in your life. Well, we have you covered. Or if you're an Arsenal fan and you want to suggest to somebody that they get you a particular gift, we've got you covered there as well. Every week over on Patreon, Andrew Allen puts together a really interesting newsletter, which is Arsenal content and football content, links and videos and stuff like that. This week, however, there is a bonus edition listing dozens and dozens of Arsenal-related gift ideas, from official stuff to bootleg stuff to loads of independent creators and creatives, and we have made that free to everybody. And you can find the link to that in the show notes now. So if you're looking desperately for something for Christmas, hopefully you can find something there, and hopefully as well it helps support a lot of these independent artists and creators whose work we should be supporting in this day and age, because it's valuable and it's important, and it's not just made by somebody typing in a prompt to some kind of AI bullshit that churns out an image that looks crap and is crap and has no inherent value whatsoever. So there you go. You'll find that, as I said, in the show notes, and hopefully something that tickles your fancy or the fancy of somebody who might be buying you a gift for Christmas. On top of that, if you were impressed by the tifo at the North London Derby, we gave a shout out after that on the Arsecast Extra to Dan Evans, who was a big part of that. But Dan, along with his mate Josh, you might remember, designed a very, very cool Bukayo Saka t-shirt a couple of years ago. We actually gave away a couple here on the podcast. Well, Dan and Josh are at it again. This time it is an Eberechi Eze Dragon Ball mashup t-shirt being sold through a store like 94. And later on in this particular episode, we will give you a chance to win one of those t-shirts. There's also a discount code if you want to just buy one, so stand by for that. That's all to come a little bit later on. Now, though, let's talk about the football and what was a very positive night for Arsenal, a 3-0 win over Club Brugge. Lots to get into, lots to unpack, and it is my pleasure to welcome back to the Arsecast from CBS Sports. It's James Benge. James, good morning to you.
Hi, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. You know, glad to get back to winning ways after the disappointment of Aston Villa last weekend. You know, Arsenal lost to Liverpool earlier in the season, went on an 18-game unbeaten run. Hopefully this is the first of at least 18 again last night in the Champions League. And a slightly familiar yet unfamiliar team for this one, with a solid enough looking midfield. But in defence, you have Christian Norgard at centre-half. Miles Lewis-Skelly comes in, all change in the front three as well. So people were really looking for Mikel Arteta to rotate for this one, to really, really use his squad. Some of it was necessity, and I think some of the decisions he made were, interesting to get some minutes into some legs who I think are going to be very useful over the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, I mean, we can sort of assess his performance. I'm sure we will as we go, but I was really positively impressed and surprised. I didn't see Norgard at centre-back coming at all. And that was the one where I was like, I see the logic here. I can't imagine it's much more than a break glass in case of emergency option. But this was sort of something like an emergency. And, when you just sort of see, you think of a player profile and you think, yeah, that will do what I need at centre-back. I've always kind of, my worry about Norgard has been sort of his ability to dictate tempo from a DM position. Well, I'm not so worried if he can't dictate the play Saliba style as the 5th, 6th choice centre-back. That's fine. I really like that. I liked, I think it's pretty clear that It's very hard to know on Yuri and Timber, isn't it? Exactly what Mikel Arteta... It's always hard to know what Mikel Arteta means when he talks about injury.
Yeah.
But the sense I have of this was much more of a let's just kind of keep him out of the firing line was encouraging. I think Arteta sometimes gets in his head the idea that he has players that can just play and play and play. And it's certainly true that some players suit that way of management more than others. But it was nice to get him out of the team. Impressed to also just have the confidence to hold Saka back. To maybe say to Eberechi Eze, if you're going to perform like that, you might need to have you probably can't start the next game. And when the end result of that as well is that basically Arsenal are all but guaranteed top 8, it's going to be really hard now to not get top 2 as well. That to me is a very, very good day.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you talk about holding Saka back, and I get that, but isn't this the exact sort of scenario that you bring in a player like Noni Madueke for, where this is look, on paper, a game Arsenal should win first against, it's weird to say it, first against 27th in the table, It's a 36-team table, but Club Brugge are in 27th, so a fair gap between them. But beyond even... Right, he's been out injured, we're bringing him back, we want to get minutes into his legs. This sort of, for want of a better phrase, a timeshare environment within the Arsenal squad, as and when we have more players fit, I think that would become more apparent. But, we've been a little hamstrung in that sense. But this, to me, is exactly the sort of fixture where you say to Bukayo Saka, listen, we'll bring you back in for the weekend. It is Wolves, top against bottom in the Premier League, but this is the kind of game where we want you to score some goals and maybe get a couple of assists. So tonight is the night for Noni Madueke to go out and show us what he can do. And to be fair to him, he absolutely did that.
Oh, he really did. But I think my worry with sort of Mikel Arteta in past seasons in terms of rotation has been that I don't think he likes sort of leaving a job half done. But I think maybe the Mikel Arteta of last year and the year before, who admittedly didn't have the same depth of quality players, would have kind of looked at a game like this one and said, if we don't win this, we're kind of being dragged into the chasing pack. We're going to have to work harder against Inter then in January. We're going to have to work harder against Kyra. You know what? I know I maybe shouldn't, but I'm just going to give Bukayo Saka an hour here. Hopefully we'll win the game and he'll come off, and we know what would happen in one of those games. Yeah. Give him an hour and
don't say it. Don't say it.
And so, I don't know how much Mikel Arteta of 24, 25, 23, 24 would have done this if he'd had a player like Noni Madueke on the bench, but I'm really encouraged that he does it. Boy, did Noni Madueke vindicate that decision. I was, from day one of the links, if I was spraying graffiti, it would have been like, give Madueke a 10-year deal. I was very high on Noni Madueke, and I will keep saying that because I feel very vindicated about the whole thing.
Well, it was an amazing goal to put us ahead. I think what we saw here was decisiveness. We saw strength. We saw dribbling ability. We saw a player unafraid to produce, as Arteta spoke about afterwards, a sort of moment of individual brilliance, the sort of goals that we don't maybe score enough of. These, like the Martinelli one as well, which is not necessarily a goal you associate with him in a big way, and we'll circle back around to that. But I think he started talking about this stuff, if you remember, after the Bayern game where we lost 1-0 away from home after that first leg. And he talked about maybe just lacking those individual moments, the guy who can unlock a game with a dribble, with a pass, with a finish, something special. And that was certainly a very special goal from Noni Madueke. Not only did he do all the hard stuff of taking the ball, beating the man, getting to the edge of the box or just outside the box, unleashing the shot, the fact that it went in off the underside of the crossbar makes the goal officially 25% better than it would have been if it had just gone top corner.
Oh, what it needs to do then, I think, is bounce back onto one of the posts, and that is just simple aesthetic. But that is, that's hang it in the Louvre.
Yeah.
stuff there. In fact, that's hang it in the Louvre and it gets stolen from the Louvre and they return whatever it was they took last time. Because they go, can we swap this for Noni Madueke's first goal against Club Brugge?
Keep your fucking Mona Lisa. We want this.
One of the things that I think this is generally true of like Arsenal's recruitment throughout the summer. Eberechi Eze it does similar things, but these are players that take shots, that get into dangerous areas, and sometimes they get into dangerous areas in a way that, for a team like Arsenal that like to have their rest defence set, that like to make sure that if there is a turnover in the attacking third, they're snuffing it out. To an extent, Madueke shouldn't be a player that fits with that. But that's kind of why you need him. That's what the value of him is that he's someone that will be falling over and go, well, I'll still dribble at these two Club Brugge defenders, and that will take a swing where, not just Ødegaard, but Saka, maybe even players like Kai Havertz just wouldn't really do that. They wouldn't have a go. He takes so many shots. I think that was true of his Chelsea career as well. And I know this isn't the Chelsea cast, but I was watching their game last night, the night before, and I was really struck by Chelsea need a guy like Madueke, someone that will run at defenders and beat them and get the ball into the penalty area. And their crosses might be a bit inconsistent, and that as players they might be inconsistent, but that almost is the challenge for defenders. Is it's a lot harder to know what they're going to do than it sometimes is someone like João Pedro, who just drops off and cycles possession around. And I think that sort of gambling instinct is something that Arsenal have really added to the squad with Madueke, Eze, and I suppose we're attempting to add with Gyökeres, who I'm sure we'll come on to.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you would sort of put that at odds with the way Mikel Arteta's brain works. Like, Arteta's brain feels strategic, minimize risk at all times. But I think maybe he's not opened up to the idea, but, he's been here for 6 years now and has learned that there are ways and there are things that you can't control when they go against you. So maybe as a manager, you kind of have to embrace some of that, not lack of control, but the ability to inflict those moments onto other teams. Like where you say, well, there are things we can't control. Like if a guy beats a couple of men and smashes it in the top corner from 30 yards, what can you do about that, really? Apart from make a foul, maybe, but you're still not legislating for that player to sort of smack it top corner. But now you have that a bit more. You have that, as you said, with Eze. You have it with Madueke. I think we have it with Bukayo Saka, even though we haven't seen it a great deal. We saw it a bit from Martinelli. One of the things that I think has been quite interesting about Martin Ødegaard in the last couple of games is the shooting. Like that he, I don't know if it's like a team edict or if he's saying, well, look, these guys are doing it, I've got to do it too. Almost the first thing that Arsenal did in the game last night was an Ødegaard shot from just outside the box, which the keeper pushed away. He had some attempts against Villa at the weekend, which obviously didn't go in the back of the net. But I think there is maybe more within the ethic or within the team structure itself, a desire for everybody to contribute in that sense, that it's not just down to the maverick guys that you bring in. It's about making more of those opportunities on the edge of the box where I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that Arsenal have been at times a little bit shot shy in the past.
Absolutely. I think actually kind of if you take that to the other end, it's probably the case that Arsenal got counted on a lot more than they would have liked last night. And I think they gave up an awful lot of shots, an awful lot of chances. Some of that was Bruges playing quite well, I thought. But I think some of it is that Arsenal are like scurrying back more than they're used to, and they're a bit more chaotic. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Arsenal can be the team that plays with the handbrake on, but is very controlled. But they can also be the team that like cuts the brakes on this game and sort of says, well, we're at the top of the hill. We're going down. Like, do you fancy yourselves in this? Do you fancy yourselves like to emerge from the wreckage of this game? And I thought this was quite that sort of game. And you just back your finishing quality, you back your forwards, and you back your defenders at the other end who, not perfect, but you can kind of trust they'll be better.
How much do you put last night, for example? Because I think this is a game that probably needs to be looked at in isolation rather than as concurrent with most of what Arsenal have done this season. And part of that is the context, maybe. The fact that Arsenal are top of the Champions League table, were top of the Champions League table and could not take it easy. But this was not a high stakes encounter. There was also obviously the absence of Gabriel, of Saliba, of Christian Mosquera. You're playing a defensive midfielder at centre half. You're playing Piero Hincapié, whatever you want to call him, the dog driving the car, which is still a brilliant analogy. But I watched him last night and was like, if I was a centre forward, I would absolutely hate to be playing against Piero Hincapié, because Martin Keown was on commentary for TNT Sports, and Martin Keown's nickname back in the day was Rash, because he was all over the opposition player when he was, very often asked to do a man-marking job, and it was literally man marking to the nth degree. He would follow him around the pitch. He'd be all over him in every challenge. There were elements of that to Hincapié's game, but I think, you're sort of missing the running power of Declan Rice. You're missing your defensive solidity at centre half. So I think when you look at the chances that Club Brugge had, and they did have chances, and I think maybe an underrated player in this game is David Raya, because they had 7 or 8 shots on target. He had to make 7 or 8 saves, a couple of them pretty good saves. But I think it was more about what Arsenal missed in terms of connections and cohesion than the sort of game plan itself.
Yeah, I felt like this was a game that no one needs reminding of Declan Rice's qualities. But when you have Declan Rice in that left 8 position, there are so many occasions where the opposition think, "Oh, we're getting away with one here. We're going to get," and then he comes slamming in, wins the ball back, and Arsenal suddenly have dangerous possession in the attacking third. And, we'll talk about depth for all through this season. It may well be the story of a successful season and what was the difference, but you can't have a depth option behind Declan Rice. There is no alternative to that. Mikel Merino was absolutely fine. No problem with that, but what he can't do is, warp the field like Declan Rice can. There's maybe only half a dozen players in the world that can do that. And I think kind of then everything becomes more difficult from there. I think it's a lot easier again for Hincapié to go with his attacker when Declan Rice is there with the sort of instincts for, okay, Hincapié's gone, I've got the running power and the defensive nous to cover. And I do almost think, this was 18 shots, 1.5 or something, say XG game for Club Brugge. I think if you put Rice in this team, you take those shots down to 12.
Yeah.
Raya doesn't have as much to do. And, I think that's fine. That's no worry. It helps as well, doesn't it, that you have one of the best goalkeepers in the world in those circumstances. So, yeah, like you say, it's a game to sort of not sort of get het up with the systemic problems, because the systemic problems come from the fact you can't name your best players. Yeah,
I mean, I think your point about Rice and the way he covers, there was a moment late in the first half when Stankovic beat the offside trap. I was convinced he was so far beyond the last defender. I was absolutely convinced he was offside, and somebody on Blue Sky sent me a screenshot where I think it's Christian Norgard playing him on by a mile, but he goes running through. But in one of the replays, you can see Mikel Merino sort of chasing back, going like, Jesus Christ, trying to get back desperately to cover for Hincapié, and it was one of those saves that Raya made. And I think, fair play to Club Brugge. After we went ahead, the momentum shifted a little bit, and they did have chances. There was another one, Stankovic, I think, from the edge of the box, just curled wide, and there was a moment, wasn't there? I can't remember if first half or second half, where the ball broke to, can't remember which player it was, but it broke to him in exactly the same way as it broke to Emi Buendia at Aston Villa. I was like, fucking flashbacks. But he didn't quite apply the same sort of finish. But, there was stuff for Arsenal to deal with defensively in this game.
Yeah, it's the nature of Champions League football that, and I know by all accounts Club Brugge are not having the best time of it, but you play teams that kind of spend most of their time. You play teams in the league phase that spend so much of their time as front-footed teams. They don't really see the logic in going 5-4-1 for Arsenal. They don't know how to play it, and they won't be playing it for any games other than these ones. We should also say, like, Club Brugge scored 3 goals against Barcelona. They're clearly not a bad team. And I do think that, that sometimes brings out a more chaotic side to the game. I mean, even if you go back to sort of the 7-2 against PSV Eindhoven, PSV had far more chances. That's why they got 2 goals. They had far more chances than most Premier League teams that would kind of come and nick a point against Arsenal. And, I think that it serves to sort of maybe heighten the sense that, like you say, Christian Norgard is not a man that is used to the offside trap. He's hardly sort of Tony Adams type. Miles Lewis-Skelly looked rusty, which is to be expected because even though he's getting more minutes of late, it's not week in, week out starting with Gabriel inside of him. I thought they were, especially in that period before Madueke's goal just sort of killed them a little bit, even a little bit after the 3rd goal. I thought they played some nice front-footed football and sort of showed that, against this Arsenal, you can make some chances for yourself.
Yeah, so look, I guess their halftime message would have been, hey, we've had some encouragement. Let's keep that up, guys. Don't give anything away early in the second half. I don't know if they switched off. There was a weird moment where there was a throw into Arsenal and the ref had a word with Gyökeres about it. So Gyökeres was complaining and he called Odegaard over and had a word with Gyökeres. I don't know if they were distracted by that, but the ball came to Martin Zubimendi, who I want to ask you about before we just unpack the goal. I want to ask you about Martin Zubimendi. He sort of took it beyond the defender, beautiful cross with his left foot, and the defenders and the goalkeeper just watch it go over their heads. Noni Madueke, good movement, back post, simple little header for him to make it 2-0, and that would have taken the wind completely out of the Club Brugge sails.
Oh, completely. Yeah. I've watched the goal back 3 or 4 times, and I don't really understand what went wrong here. Just sloppy, isn't it? And maybe I don't want to blow the Arsenal trumpet too much, but maybe we look at this and go, "What on earth has happened here?" We don't ever see this in football matches, but we mostly watch Arsenal. We don't see errors. We don't see defensive errors, and we normally see the other team drilled to within an inch of their life to sort of try and cling on in the game. Yeah, it was. I think the thing though is huge credit to Madueke that he's gambling on that, and I think that gambling instinct is something that other big money forwards in this team could learn from.
Okay, let's talk about Zubimendi because week on week, I get ever more impressed by him. And I think what we saw in this game was a creative element, which people don't necessarily associate with him. 6 key passes in this game, which for a DM, a number 6 is quite good going. It's fair to say. The cross for Madueke was delicious with his left foot. But what I was just and every week I watch him, I get more and more impressed by what's obviously real football intelligence. And that's sort of like a buzzword that gets thrown around sometimes without any real meaning or with any real context. But when you watch Zubimendi, you can see it. Not just with what he does with the ball, but where he positions himself in our half, in the opposition half, when we've got the ball and when we don't have the ball. I think his adaptation and his integration and becoming such a fundamental piece of this Arsenal team so quickly is a real credit to him.
I'd love to sort of go back and watch a game that he played with maybe an Eze Rice midfield straight after this one. Because, like you say on game intelligence, I have this feeling that he understands the profile of the players around him and what is then required of him. So when it's Eze, when it's Rice, that's 2 players that are going to really look to force the issue, up the tempo, drive past players. And his job is probably to cycle the ball around the attacking third, to sit a little bit deeper and just kind of control the tempo a little bit more. Be, the classic DM. last night, like you say, 6 chances created. I think in the attacking third, he was kind of the loosest in possession. I think he gave the ball away more. Like, we had the lowest pass completion percentage of anyone in that Arsenal team. And I think that's a function of him understanding that, I'm not here to sort of debate or criticise Martin Ødegaard, but that Martin Ødegaard is maybe not the guy to accelerate the speed of play. Mikel Merino, similarly, probably not. I don't want to, again, it's not a criticism, a player that might just keep things moving. And with those two in front of him, maybe what Zubimendi could do most effectively is to play the slightly more high risk, high reward passes.
Yeah.
Gamble a little bit with possession and see what comes of it. And I think for a lot of players, I would just be sceptical and I'd be like, well, no, they maybe just didn't pass the ball very well. But with Zubimendi, I have long since got to the stage where I'm just going to believe he understands the game so well that what's the most complex answer? It might well just be that that's what he was trying to do here because, the speed of his adaptation and understanding of like how you play Premier League football and how you play for an English team. You didn't get this from Rodri. You didn't get this from Granit Xhaka. You didn't get this from almost any sort of midfielder you care to name. I'm blown away by it. And you see it every time he sort of picks someone's pocket in the other half. Right now, I'm in awe of the guy. I think it's one of the best pieces of business that we've done in the Mikel Arteta era. I think he is kind of up there with Rice, Saliba, and Gabriel. It's like I just couldn't do without him for a big game. And the knowledge that he will quite quickly read the circumstances of the game and just run it the way he needs to is something really invigorating for when you think about what might be happening in April and May.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he completed 46 of 57 passes last night. 9 of the 11 misplaced passes were forward passes in the opposition half. So that tells you exactly what you just said, that this was about trying to make things happen. It's not about carelessness. It's not about coughing up the ball laterally in midfield in areas where, you expect him to make a pass. He's trying to make things happen. They didn't always happen, but it happened enough, obviously, with the goal and the other chances that he created. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think he's been absolutely vital. I suppose, I'm not saying it's a downside of last night, but the injuries, the fact that Norgard had to play at centre half rather than in midfield probably meant that Zubimendi had to do 90 minutes when ideally maybe you wouldn't want that. Perhaps this weekend, though, if there are players back, and there are more options available to Mikel Arteta, Wolves at home might just be the kind of fixture where he can look on from the bench, and if we need him, we need him. If we don't, we don't. He has a nice little rest then before the next game against Everton. Martinelli, a case of, well, anything you can do? Because, as I said earlier, this is not the kind of goal you normally associate with Gabriel Martinelli. I have a vague recollection of that remember that blistering period where he first came into the team and started scoring goals? That there were maybe 1 or 2 like this back then. But generally speaking, these are not the kind of goals that he scores. 25-yard curlers from outside the box. I don't have too many recollections of him doing that, but it's a lovely little string to add to his bow, isn't it? Beating a man, cutting back, curling in the shot into the top corner. If Madueke can score a banger, so can I. And Arsenal's 2, in inverted commas, second choice wingers. And I say that just because Trossard has been in such good form. Saka is Saka. But Martinelli, 5 games in a row in the Champions League. He scored for Arsenal, first player ever to do that. And maybe this is the best of the 5 goals that he's got so far this season.
Yeah, we always got the sense, didn't we, that he was like learning from Gabriel Jesus, and Jesus was vital to him. And like, these are 2 guys that's just like they hear that music, and it is it's the Ronaldinho licking his lips meme, isn't it? When the Champions League music plays, they light up. I'll be honest, I can't remember one. I'm like kind of scratching my head. Was against Forest in the EFL Cup under Emery. I feel like he scored 2 goals, and there was a header, and maybe the other one was good. Obviously, part of this is we don't see that because really Martinelli, before this sort of more recent run of games, hadn't very often been getting into those attacking midfielder, Saka on the other flank positions of a license to cut inside. He was the chalk on your boots winger, hold it wide, and we wonder why he's not sort of scoring 15, 16 goals like he was in that first title challenging year. Well, he's dribbling down the wing. And I do think I sort of been intrigued to get a sense from Arteta if this is deliberate, if this is just where the games have taken them to an extent. Like you have, especially like when he had Calafiori playing against Bayern, like Calafiori's been a bit more willing to go down the flank on occasion, and that opens up this space inside. But yeah, I mean, from there it's a lovely goal that I want to just be very clear from the outset. My heart is with Noni Madueke's first goal.
I'm not asking you to choose. It's not like you're asking you to pick your favorite children here, James. You can love them both.
choose your favorite child, and someone answers a bit too quickly.
Yeah. Him, that one. Oh shit. It's a great goal, and it gave Arsenal, the cushion they needed to go on and control the game pretty comfortably. It also allowed Mikel Arteta to make some changes, and I suppose the most interesting change, notable change, was the return of Gabriel Jesus after 333 days on the sideline. With a really bad ACL injury. They didn't expect him to come back this quickly, which is why he wasn't previously included in the Champions League squad. But injury to Max Daumann meant that he could be registered in time for this one. And an interesting little cameo from him as well. It struck me when I looked at some of the positions that he got into, and I think I should caveat this by saying it's later in the game. He's got fresh legs. The defenders are a bit more tired. The game is a bit more open, a bit more stretched. But it just struck me that if we could combine Gabriel Jesus' ability to get into those positions with the sort of power and ferocity of Victor Gyökeres finishing, we would have a hell of a player on our hands. We need a Jesus. I don't know. I think Gyökeres struggled to really make an impact. I don't know that he got a lot of service as well, so that's fair to say, and he is only coming back from injury. But, the sort of contrast between him not necessarily getting in the positions, but then Jesus getting into those positions and the finishing just lacking that kind of power or clinical nature that you expect from Gyökeres when he certainly gets into those positions or got into those positions with frequency for Sporting Lisbon, a bit more than Arsenal so far. It'd be a hell of a player, but listen, we've all watched the new Frankenstein and it just doesn't turn out that well.
Can I sort of go back in time as well and give him Kai Havertz's availability prior to 2025?
Yes. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I'm firmly of the view of like anything you get from Gabriel Jesus this season is a bonus. I think it's kind of worryingly feels like his knees have just given up the ghost. But I mean, it's always seemed to me that, if Mikel Arteta could have anyone, maybe even in world football, lead the Arsenal line beyond the sort of very best, it would be that prime version of Gabriel Jesus that they had in the summer of 2022 and the autumn of 2022. Just a player that can... What struck me, the thing that I know a few people didn't like about Gyökeres was maybe when he was coming to the ball, there's the strength, but maybe not the ability to knock that first pass and then get things moving. And I thought you got that really nicely from Jesus. He's a lot stronger than people think, or at least he is until something happens to him. And it was really notable to me that he can move, he can bring defenders with him, still win that duel, pass the ball nicely, and Arsenal are going, and he's free to roam a bit further and a bit wider. I really, really like that profile of striker, and I think there are going to be a lot of games where that would be the ideal way for Arsenal to build their attack. I mean, you kind of saw like even Mikel Marino, when he was playing up front, was giving Arsenal a bit more of that. I'll drop out of the front line and make this space that Calafiori can fill. That mad that I go to Calafiori before I go to any of Arsenal's actual attackers. Calafiori can fill that, Martinelli, Trossard, whoever. And I think it makes Arsenal a bit easier on the eye. It makes them a bit more unpredictable. The trade-off then is that, like you say, like the Jesus shots end up being sort of a lot of side footers from the edge of the box, whereas the sort of imagined ideal of Gyökeres that we were seeing before the injury on occasion is the guy that's hanging around a little bit, that might only get 12 touches in the game, but one of those is to absolutely leather the ball in from 6 yards out. And I think it will be a horses for courses thing. In the ideal world where Jesus can play, Havertz can play, and Gyökeres can play, they're all relatively unique profiles, and there would be games that call for all three of them. I mean, that I know it's not going to happen, but man can dream.
Well, yeah, because of the inevitability of an Arsenal injury depriving us of a player. Is that what it is? But I mean, I do think it's a fascinating thing to think about, because for me, Jesus, listen, I think Gyökeres is different from Havertz, is different from Marino, but I can sort of see a through line between the three big guys, if you like, and that is the presence that they give you in the box. But what I think with Jesus is you have a level of skill and craft and an ability to turn a technical level that's really, really, really high. And that just gives him that little bit, I don't want to call it X factor, but just a little bit of something different for the Arsenal attack. So I think it would be hugely beneficial if between now and May, we can keep him fit. He can start some games. He can come on in some games. We know he can also play in the wide areas too. That we have those decisions to make, or Mikel Arteta has those decisions to make, which, as you say, horses for courses, it does feel like, let's say, magically, all those players are available and approximating 100% fit at some point in the new year. I think it might depend on the opposition. It might depend on the form. It might depend on who else is in the team around them, like who's behind them in midfield. Is Eze there? Is Odegaard there? Is someone not there? Do we need more of a blunt force instrument? Do we need a bit more I think there will be really interesting decisions for Mikel Arteta to make. I mean, it feels like so often this season in particular that the ability to demonstrate his decision-making when it comes to players in certain positions has been stripped away because there is no decision. You only have Gyökeres at the start of the season because Jesus is out and because Kai Havertz picks up an injury. So Gyökeres has to play all the time. And then when Gyökeres is not there, well, you have to play Mikel Marino. But when you can choose between A, B, C, and D, that's where I think it'll start to get very interesting for Arteta. And for us as spectators, looking to see how he not only manages the squad, but attempts to win games in different competitions with a schedule that is going to be really, really hectic.
And I think what's so frustrating about the fact that we've kind of seen Arteta forced into this position of just like hammering away at Victor Gyökeres's ankles until they go pop, and having to feeling compelled a bit to run Declan Rice to run Declan Rice ragged, is that actually when he's in a position to do this, to be a bit more rotational, I think we've seen a little bit of growth there and a real sense of like he knows the weapons to use. And when the Athletic Bilbao game is of course the one that stands out, where Arsenal had sort of ground them down, brought them out a little bit as well, and it was just like bang, Trossard, Martinelli, let's win the game that way. Against teams like Forest as well, he had a good sense of like this is the moment to bring Gyökeres in to attack with how they want to use Madueke. All those traits were being displayed pretty encouragingly, and it just they just don't get the chance to do it more. Is there a game I remember where he just threw in Mosquera as well at the back? I might be making that last one up. But I think there's a will from Arteta. There's he doesn't want to coach the way he is, but sometimes there's a load of impact injuries, and a lot of it, we have to say, has been impact injuries. It's been weird things that happen on the pitch that you can't coach out of a squad. So I hope these sunlit uplands of Jesus, Havertz, and Gyökeres marauding around the field, I hope we just get it for a month.
Yeah. Well,
whatever happens, that would be nice.
It would be lovely, wouldn't it? And some lovely scenes at the end, I think, with Jesus having been out for so long, and players understand how hard that is when you don't play and you've got to go through the rehab and the pain. And I saw his interview post-game where he's obviously a religious guy, and he was talking quite a lot about God and how he gives all the thanks to God for saving his life, is basically what he said. And he intimated he went through some very, very difficult times, but ultimately he's the guy who's got to do the rehab and do the work and do the training, and he's got to see his mates go out and play every week, and he can't be involved. And that is, for any footballer, whether you're professional or amateur or semi-pro, whatever it is, if you can't play and you're looking at all your mates go, it's the worst. It's just the absolute worst. So the scenes at the end with, Ben White, with Kepa, big hugs from Kepa, and those, they knew what this meant to him and how hard he's had to work to get himself back onto the pitch. Yeah,
I mean, and several of them, like Ben White, have shared fairly similar experiences, sadly. I think what's credit to Jesus is, I mean, you've seen this kind of in some of the interviews that he's given with the Brazilian media as well. There's always that escape route for him. I think he's such a high-profile player in his homeland, and everyone's sort of known that, like, while this recovery in December was earlier than Arsenal expected, that he'd be kind of in a position where, if he wanted to, he could go back to Brazil, finish off his rehab there, play for a Palmeiras or another team, and kind of win his World Cup spot in the Brazilian league, go back home, call it a day. And realistically, in the summer, if a Brazilian club had come along and said, we'd like to take Jesus off your hands, Arsenal are not going to say no.
He's still only 28, though,
I know. I mean, and that's the thing. He didn't give up. He wasn't like, this is me done now at the top European level. He sort of said, I'm going to keep playing for this. He said right along, hasn't he, that he's got this contract until the end of next season. He'd like to see that out. And I mean, I know some of that is also a function of the fact he's very well remunerated for playing for Arsenal, but it's really clear when we've sort of spoken to him after previous comebacks, he bought into that project from day one. He was entranced by the idea of making this contender, having been parachuted into one at City. And I don't think he feels like his business is done or will be done until he's played a part in Arsenal winning the biggest prizes.
Well, fingers crossed he can do that. Nice little cameo from Ethan Nwaneri, a player who hasn't maybe played as much as people might like, certainly not as much as he would have liked. I think that's true of both him and Miles this season. I think as well it's a function or a consequence of having this big, deep squad that your minutes as an 18-year-old become a little more limited. But, he could have put Eze on. He didn't. He put Nwaneri on, and he was lively and bright and did, I'm sure, apart from put the ball in the back of the net, denied by a good save from the keeper, he did exactly what Mikel Arteta would have wanted him to do in that situation. The game was won. You could coast about for 20 minutes if you want, but he was really trying to catch the eye, but not in a, sometimes with young players, they're like, oh, I've got to do something. I've got to score the goal. I've got to make the dribble. I've got to, this is almost a selfishness to it. I don't think that was the case with Nwaneri. There were a couple of nice combos with Miles Lewis-Skelly, helped the team get high up the pitch. I was impressed by that. I know it's a positive night. We're probably taking all the positives and amplifying them a little bit, but why not? Why not? We've come off the back of a weekend where the negatives were certainly amplified far and wide, and I understand that. So why not do it the opposite way?
Yeah, I thought what I liked about Nwaneri is he just came on and played his game. It was, like we sort of said about Madueke, it was aggressive in possession, but not like I've got a point to make here aggressive. It was, this is how I play. I'll pull the trigger. If there's a chance to pull the trigger, I'll have a go. Really nice, good eye for a pass. Was not gambling with possession, but was pushing Arsenal up the field. I don't know how often we'll get to see that over the next few months. I suppose the worry is a successful season for Arsenal is probably one where it's relatively unsuccessful on an individual level for Nwaneri, but, needs must.
Who knows? A debut as well at right back for 16-year-old Marley Salmon, worth noting as well, given how very, very young he is. He only turned 16 in August. Again, a consequence of defensive absences and injuries, but a great moment for Hale End, another player coming through, another very highly rated young player as well. So yeah, there's a nice little icing or a little cherry on the cake, I guess.
I saw a stat, which I can't quite remember, so apologies to Opta if I butcher this, but I believe it's there have been 3 English players, 16 or younger, to have played in the Champions League, and they've all come through Hale End. So that would be Will Shear, Max Diamond, and Marley Salmon.
Wow.
And I mean, Owen Hargreaves, I think, made this point after the game on TNT. The guys just come in and they look utterly at ease with the situation. It doesn't, there's nothing skittish about his 7 minutes. And I know that 7 minutes when you're 3-0 up against Club Brugge is not the sort to discombobulate a young professional, but he looked like an Arsenal player. It's pretty nice to see.
Yeah.
Especially because if Arsenal can get an academy graduate through their defence, that's the first in, other than Lewis Skelly, in 20 years.
Who are we talking now? We're talking Justin Hoyt?
Hoyt, yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Hoyt. That is 20 years now. I mean, he's a invincible adjacent.
Adjacent, yeah. Wow, yeah, it is hard. It is hard to make defenders. It's hard to make strikers and hard to make defenders. What happens is sometimes your attackers become defenders, as we saw in the shape of Lewis Skelly. As an attacking midfielder or a midfielder. Ashley Cole as well was an attacker who moved back to left back. So listen, all in all, a very good night for Arsenal. And the European form, 6 wins out of 6. It's there's been a remarkable and probably underappreciated consistency to Arsenal's group stages in the Champions League since we returned to the competition a couple of years ago, where last season was really, really impressive. Season before as well, I think. This season, no defeats. Sometimes it can take a club or a team a little while to get used to the top level of European football again. And I do think it is worth appreciating just how good and how consistent Arsenal have been in the group stages of the Champions League. It's sort of like, yeah, of course, Arsenal won again. And it's not easy.
I mean, it's really not easy. I'm fascinated. Do you think it will matter to Mikel Arteta at all that Arsenal could be the first team to have an 8 win from 8 league phase? Is that something that, it has to end? It's a bit like, in leagues like, in the NBA, was it 10 years ago, the Golden State Warriors went 73-9. It was a new win record.
Right.
And they didn't win the championship. So it forever was like, well, they did all that and they didn't win anything. But it's a way of, at the very least, I think if you were to go 8 wins from 8, you are stamping your authority on this competition. You are saying to the rest of Europe, as you did against Bayern Munich, look, we're the best team. We're the ones you're going to have to beat. Every road to the trophy probably goes through us. Like the sort of curio side of it, my suspicion is everyone in the fan base will be like, if you can do that without risking a minute of Saka, Gabriel, Saliba, more power to you. I
think it will matter to him in the sense that he is a guy who wants to win every game. I think he is also somebody we know, maybe it sort of doesn't get remarked on much anymore because of how long he's been at the club. But I think part of what drives Arteta is to change the perception of Arsenal. And that has been a key to everything that he has done. I always go back to this, and I mentioned it before. Do you remember the game against Man City before he took over? And it was, I try not to as well, but this moment always sticks in my mind where City, they win that game 3-0, I think. They don't have to get out of second gear. And there's Mikel Arteta sitting on the bench, looking around, and you can see he is thinking this is just not good enough. It's not good enough for Arsenal Football Club to get turned over. However good Manchester City are, for the apathy that was within the fan base and inside the stadium, and that's not me being critical of that. That was a build-up of years that brought Arsenal to that point. And I think when Arteta looked around the stadium that night, he looked at Pep and he looked at what was happening at Arsenal, and fundamental to everything that he's done has been to change the perception of this football club domestically and in Europe. And it's been a process and it's been part of it. And I think it doesn't win you anything if you win 8 in a row in the group stage and you finish top of the table. It might help you get a more favourable draw. But I also think that when other clubs are looking at Arsenal, if we win 8 from 8 and finish top of the Champions League group, and you've beaten Atletico Madrid and you've beaten Inter, which, is no easy task if we can manage to do that. You've beaten Bayern Munich. You haven't conceded a goal. Apart from so far, I think the game against Munich is the only goal Arsenal have conceded in Europe so far. You've kept clean sheets against, teams who are decent. I think that is something that he would absolutely want, without saying this is our goal, this is our ambition for the season. I just think it's all part of what he wants to do.
It's what big clubs do. And I think, it's really interesting you mentioned that, because right the way through the story and remembering, I was thinking that Arsenal were a sort of big club in name only. They didn't act like a big club. They didn't recruit like a big club. They couldn't energize their fan base. I mean, obviously, the biggest clubs just sort of like lurch Real Madrid style into chaos every few weeks. But I mean, I think the sort of value of this Champions League phase, if they get top, aside from all the seeding and the home draw and all that, is that you've just sort of said, no, we're not just back. We are, prime Arsenal here. We are like the best team in Europe, or at least we can lay claim to that title before it's officially crowned. And I think that, like you say, I think that matters for the Arteta project.
So we'll wait and see. Obviously, there are 2 games in January to run out the Champions League group stage. I did want to ask you before we go, James, about the FA Cup. The draw was made this week. Arsenal away to Portsmouth. Hasn't been the kindest competition for Arsenal. I think this is another fascinating thing. There's another thing I want to ask you about before the end. I'm going to write it down here so I don't forget. But the FA Cup, right? The win in 2020 probably gave Mikel Arteta a kind of security that he might not otherwise have had during a period where we were building, developing, and went through a really bad run of form. And, at other clubs, he might have been given the P45. But the FA Cup was sort of like this security thing for him because he'd won it in his first season. But ever since, Arsenal have been subpar. Shit. Yeah, okay, fair enough. A bit shit in the FA Cup, right? And I'm fascinated as to what he thinks about it. I'm also fascinated as to sort of what the wider fan base thinks about the FA Cup, because there is this pressure on Arsenal to deliver trophies. And there will be people, if Arsenal win the FA Cup and that's it, will say, well, that's not good enough. That's not enough to win the FA Cup. We want more than that. And obviously, the aim and the ambition and the way we've built this squad is to win the Premier League and the Champions League. But the FA Cup remains important. It remains important to maybe people of my generation a bit more than some of the younger generations, which is absolutely fine. And I'm just curious to know how much you think in the second half of this season, Arteta will focus on the cups, but prioritize the cups. A lot will depend on the draw. Obviously, if you get a nice draw, you get sort of Portsmouth and Chesterfield and Altrincham and all that. It's great because you can just play a heavily rotated team, but that's not always the way it goes in the FA Cup. And the last 2 times we've won it, it's been Man City in the semi-final and Chelsea in the final. So you have to beat the big boys along the way somewhere. But do you think there's any chance that in the midst of a title race, he can overlook the importance of winning the FA Cup. We're still in the EFL Cup as well, let's not forget. So the cups are a sidebar, obviously, to the main events this season. Is there a risk?
I think, like you say, I mean, we should start with it's a pretty favourable draw. Portsmouth are in the relegation zone in the Championship, so it allows you to do what games against. I mean, we've had Liverpool, City, United in the last few years don't allow you to do in the third round when you're probably running on steam anyway. It's just rest a few players. You know, you would think against Portsmouth it will be whoever needs minutes in their legs, and that's final. I mean, I think what we also need to remember is in those years with Arsene Wenger, when Arsenal won the biggest prizes or were in the mix for the biggest prizes, they would sometimes. I mean, I might be misremembering some of these, but I certainly remember games in the cup in the double winning seasons where Arteta went unduly. Wenger went unduly weak, and just found a way through. The United game where he doesn't start Henry that's the invincible. That's the
invincible season. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So there's always a risk to it that ultimately only pays off if you win the biggest prizes. But in the end, I think Arsenal are so well placed to win one or two of the trophies that really, really matter at the moment. That if Mikel Arteta were to draw Man City in the fourth round and just went, no, not having it. I think at this, even if at the end of the season Arsenal end up with nothing, and we're like, people are saying you should have gone for it, Mikel. I think I would sort of park the criticism of not taking the FA Cup seriously. I presume I would also have to have a lot of criticism for whatever's gone wrong. That means Arsenal haven't won anything.
Sure, but yeah,
but it's 21 years. I'm not going to tell people how old I was when Arsenal last won the trophy. I'm still just about at the age where it will annoy them. And it's, forever since they've won the Champions League. I think this year of all years, when it looks like there's a chance at least one of them, you can sort of, I think you can tolerate a little bit of indifference to the FA Cup. When they've won them, I'm going to be like, standards treble now. Let's go for that.
It is
keep raising my expectations, Mikel Arteta. I'm going to need to see a treble.
Yeah, one treble, please. It's one of those things where people say, I don't care about the FA Cup, and then their reaction if Arsenal get knocked out of the FA Cup doesn't necessarily marry with that previous contention. It's a tricky one. It is a challenge trying to balance all the competitions that you're in. So we'll see how that goes. The final thing I wanted to ask you, and I would love for somebody to ask this of Mikel Arteta, I wonder, do you have an answer or an explanation or a theory on this? Why do Arsenal insist on taking long throws when the long throws that we take are not sufficiently long to cause the kind of danger that long throws should cause? What is happening here? Because, listen, valiant effort from Christian Norgard last night. Calafiori's half decent. Rice, half decent. I feel sorry when I see Miles Lewis-Skelly trying to throw a long one. That's not his strength at all. But it seems to be something that we continue to do. And I think from one of them last night, they broke up field and had a good shot on target. So what's your best guess at why this is a continued element of Arsenal's play this season?
Are you pushing the opposition back into their penalty area and thinking, well, maybe there's more bodies in there, something will happen? That is all I've got, because, they're rubbish. They're not very good.
Yeah, they're not very good.
And I don't know that you can train to be good at or in your mid-20s that you can train to be good at throwing a football really far.
No.
Or, I mean, I'm sure you could sort of take Declan Rice out of training for 2 weeks and do some sort of, boot camp for him to become able to throw the ball far enough. Only able,
not naturally, not like a natural ability like some of the guys have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it just ain't work. It just isn't it. I mean, maybe also a short throw is of so little value that maybe you just sort of kind of want to see if like someone flicks it on and something happens. But yeah, rubbish. They're really rubbish at
Well, I think what it is that they're easy to defend. You know, that's the issue for me, is that they don't go deep enough and they don't go flat enough. It's a high looping ball outside the near post, which I think at this level of the game, pretty much every defender is going to feel, right, that is mine, and I'm gonna win that and render this nonsense redundant, basically.
Maybe they're just going to buy Michael Coyote.
Maybe so. Just setting it up.
Imagine.
All right, listen, we'll leave it there. James, as ever, a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks ever so much.
Thank you very much indeed to James. You can find him on Blue Sky. He is at jamesbenge.bsky.social, at jamesbenge.bsky.social. Right, I did tell you we were going to have a competition for you, and it is the aforementioned Eberechi Eze Dragon Ball t-shirt, which you can get from a store like 94. You will find a link to the t-shirt in the show notes. There's also a 10% discount code, by the way. If you want to just go and buy one, you can get 10% off by using the code FINALPIECE. Capital letters, Final Piece, Piece. That will give you a 10% discount from a store like 94 on this t-shirt. Nevertheless, if you would like to win one, all you have got to do is answer the following question. Against who did Eberechi Eze score his first Arsenal goal? So, the first Eze goal in an Arsenal shirt, who did he score it against? Simply send your answer, please, to competition@arseblog.com. That's competition@arseblog.com. We've got a couple of t-shirts to give away. We'll give you the winners on next week's show. No need to send size or anything like that. If you win, I'll be in touch and we'll get all your details and get the t-shirt sent out to you. And thanks to Dan and Josh in a store like 94 for the prizes. And you can go have a look at the t-shirt in the link, which I already mentioned. And I think that is just about that for this week's show. We will have a preview podcast for you tomorrow over on Patreon, patreon.com/Arseblog. Remember as well, if you're really stuck for a gift, you can gift somebody a year of Arseblog Patreon. You also get a 10% discount if you sign up for the year. The link to that is also in the show notes, our gift link, which will give that lucky person access to everything that we do on Patreon, our preview podcast, the 30, ad-free Arsecast and Arsecast Extra and Arsenal Women Arsecast, Discord chat, and lots more besides. Okay, that's it. I am out of here. As ever, I want to thank you so much indeed for listening and for being with us. Hope you enjoyed the show. For now, take it easy, folks, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye. Some decent build-up play down the right-hand side there from Arsenal. Noni Madueke combines with Victor Gyökeres, trying to pull the defence apart here. Martin Zubimendi looks for the opening, plays it back to Madueke. Oh! That was very close indeed. Some might say he even mad-whacked it over the bar. Not me, though. I'll leave that shit to the likes of Fletch. Goal kick is taken long and, intercepted very well by Ben White.
but he's offside.